You're listening to Your Body Advocate, telling your body's side of the story. The podcast dedicated to supporting and improving your body-mind connection so you can live a pain-free, passion-filled life, dissolving one body tension at a time. Discover the healing properties of your own body language, and together let's explore ways to support and improve essential self-talk. Now, here's your host, Master of Encouragement and Body-Mind Life Coach, Ruth Cummings.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Your Body Advocate podcast. I am today talking to my friend, Brian McCarthy, and I am going to read you his bio since I don't have it memorized. He's amazing. I know. Should have it memorized, shouldn't I? Hold on. All right. So Brian is an incredible mindset coach. So let me read this for you. Brian is a mindset coach for business owners and executives who want a more fulfilling, balanced life, certified by the Fearless Living Institute and former copywriter for 8 years. McCarthy-mindsetcoaching.com is where you can find him. And we will definitely talk about some other places to find him. So, hi, Brian. Welcome.
Hi, Ruth. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We're doing a different type of podcast today. Brian and I have been working together for a little while, and we thought we would share publicly, and thank you, Brian, for doing that, some of what we do together and how that works. So we're working on, Brian, just tell us, what are we working on? What are we trying to support for you, and what outcome would you like to find? What have you been struggling with? What have you tried that hasn't worked? And then we'll just continue, and we'll just, because we've been doing a lot, and we'll just do what we can in our hour or more.
Yeah. The thing I was specifically came to you initially for was I probably have long COVID. I've basically, since August 2020, every 3 months I get really bad brain fog and fatigue, and I'll just be like incapacitated, unable to do anything for a good 2 weeks, which, sucks for business and sucks. Like I have all these improv shows I can't go to. I've got all these things I just have to turn down, and I'm just laying there on the couch, unable to read, unable to think or meditate or do anything. All I can do is sit there, and once you've watched all the things on Netflix, it stops being fun. And so it's cool for a day. And then after that, you're like, okay, I'm over it. But all you can do is sit there. And then that becomes a difficult bit. So, and I went to my doctor. I went to like one of the leading COVID hospitals in the country, and they just kind of threw their arms up. They're like, I don't know, there's not much you can do. Well, sorry. And a lot of my COVID tests were negative, so they're not even sure that it is long COVID. I'm just calling it that because it pretty much is, because it started when COVID happened. So take that. So they couldn't help me. And then I've heard all your stories of your magical healing powers, and this whole weird world of things being stored in the body, and how brains can help heal things and all this stuff. So I was like, let's give Ruth a go. She's done amazing stuff. All your stories were incredible. So I was very excited to, take this angle and see what kind of help might come from it.
Yeah. I love that. Just take that. It's long COVID. We don't know. And that's amazing. And it's so fun to work with you, Brian, because you're so willing, and I think you're really ready. And that's why I'm excited to pull back some more layers. And for people who are suffering with things that no one has the answers for, I just want to give you hope. There is hope out there, and it might not be me or, the doctors that you're talking to, but somebody out there has some ideas for you that will be like, whoa, it just clicks. And it's really great when that happens. And I just want you to keep trying. And Brian he keeps trying, and we're still working on this, and it's been a couple months, but so Brian, just a little history also. We saw each other once at a mastermind, and then again in the same area of the United States. And then how were you feeling that first time that we talked? the first time that we saw each other and I was suggesting some ideas about how it could be held in your chest or how the body does hold emotion, what was your first response? Because I think that's important for people because they have the same response that you did, which is like just that look, you know, the huh. And for those listening, it's this like, are you insane? And you know, probably yes, I am, but just ask my husband or my kids. But obviously there's a connection between our body and our mind. And when we can't find the answers to these chronic issues, sometimes we can fit pieces together between those two communicating forces that find amazing results. So yeah, so we meet, we had so much fun right away. There's a great picture of us laughing at that one mixer. I just love that picture. We're both just laughing so hard. It's so cute. And so I was like, well, why don't we try, have you thought about how your body's responding? Yeah. And so I'd love to hear now, like, what do you think your response was? Because I remember your face.
I mean, I think it being like, maybe a little weird and out there, but also like I've heard so many stories of, you know, like the placebo effect is a thing and a thing we don't seem to study that much or go into that much detail on, even though it seems really relevant. And I have heard enough stories of like, yes, psychosomatic illness. Again, that's a thing that we like, you know, when I was taking psychology classes in college, we're like, that's a thing. And let's just kind of shrug it off because I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like it doesn't seem like it's that super studied and understood. But I know that these things are real and they're out there. And so I think my understanding at the time was probably like, yeah, that's kind of weird, but maybe.
Right. Okay. Yeah. See, the fact that you say, yeah, but maybe is so cool. Like that puts you in the next level of willingness. What I consider, like I always say, would you consider the possibility? And when people actually tell me I would not consider the possibility, then I realize that it's just not, it's not possible because just like the placebo effect, if the person doesn't, like, I forget that quote. I think it's by Roosevelt. I can't remember when they says, if you believe that, it's true. Like whatever, if you think you can't, you're right. That's the one. If you think you can't, you're right. And I see that, and having coached so many athletes through, you know, over 30 years, if they don't think they can, then it's almost you just give up. And the same thing happens in our body. And so I was just excited that you were like, yeah, but maybe. That answers for me the possibility that the possibility is there for you, and that makes a big difference. So I just wanted to kind of catch people up, like, so we were working on some. Do you want to go through that story quickly? So
let's do it.
Yeah. So and your email is one of my favorites of all time. I haven't sent it to my email list yet, but it's you are an improv comedian, and it comes out, and it's so funny. It's so good. And it was a shocking night. It was a shocking. It was really healing, but I'd love tell me your side of it.
All right. I'm giving everyone the full story. So I met Ruth at this mastermind, and I kept noticing Ruth would go off and do this little thing where she kind of like talks quietly to people and pokes at their chest and pokes at their back, and then they start crying. And then after they cry, they get really happy and they give Ruth a really big long hug and they go, "Oh my God, that was amazing. Thank you so much." And I saw Ruth do that again and again and again. And I've been to like workshops and things that I ended up crying and feeling great. And I was like, this looks like there's some kind of healing going on. I want a part of that. Ruth, can you do this to me? And she was like, sure. So then you did a little bit of it, like the last morning of it. And don't know if we didn't quite have that much time, but it was like we were exploring, but weren't like nothing really was opening up. I wasn't crying. There wasn't too much happening. And I think you said something about like, oh, part of this like doesn't want to come out. You're not ready. And in my head, I'm like, I'm ready. What healing do you have for me? Let's go. But my body wasn't quite on board with it at the moment.
No, true.
So then a couple months later, we meet up again in a mastermind, and I've gotten, sick again in between that time, and that was the time, that sickness, maybe number 6 was when I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. This is stupid. Like, I've really got to do more here. And yeah, Ruth came top of mind for, next exploration. Let's see what Ruth's got for me here. So we met at that mastermind, and then we were on our way to dinner and getting into a cab when I think you brought up like, hey, so you've been sick, huh? And I was like, you read my mind. So we got into the back of the cab on the way to dinner. And I was like, all right, Ruth, give me your Ruth magic. Let's see what you got. And then you were like, so you start poking at my chest. And then you were like, tell me about what you miss when you were a kid. And I was like, what? That's got nothing to do with health. What are we talking about? Fine. So I start talking about and talking about like missing certain things with my family, and like this, great things about growing up that kind of like faded and stopped, and started to feel getting really emotional. And then the Lyft or whatever it was arrived at the restaurant, but we could tell something was happening. Like my body was buzzing. I was like, just feeling really in whatever was going on in my body. Like something was happening. It was just clear. Like we got like, and I was like, I don't want this to stop. Like if we're going to break something open, let's break it open. And you were willing and gracious enough to continue the work. So we went off to a little corner. We had like 25 friends in the mastermind, all having dinner together, having a great time. And we just get a little booth, right by the hostess section, and you just keep poking and you keep asking questions. and I just had this massive breakthrough of realizing like that I never let myself grieve my parents' divorce, which happened when I was about 15. Like, everyone else in my family was sad, and I kind of saw myself as like, well, I can't get sad too because everyone else is, and that's too much. And then like, oh, well, everyone else is, mad at this person for this happening. And I want to be like kind of the one person that's there for him. And, so basically I didn't process that. And like, it was all coming up. Like, it was just such big waves of, energy and emotion. Like I remember my left arm just like went numb. My fingers were seized and I couldn't even move them. There was like super tight and clammy. I think I couldn't feel my legs for a part of it. It was just this massive weight, like of everything's tingling and I'm struggling to breathe. And you're just reminding me to like, take deep breaths. It's okay. And I'm still like sharing things from the past and, just crying right there in the bar, as all this, just big waves of emotion are just getting unleashed. I also, and I noticed things about like my sister and like some struggles she has, and like times I wasn't there with her, and just feeling a lot of like grief and sadness around that. And around similar themes, like with my mom and my other sister when we were growing up, or when I was a teenager. And yeah, so I had this big like physical feeling breakthrough of all this emotion, energy, something being released, and kind of my body going a bit nuts processing that. A lot of tears, a lot of like realizations, and basically was just like, okay, I gotta go call my sister and apologize. Was basically like, hey, you remember these things that started 15 years ago that I've not been doing a good job at? I'm sorry, and I want a better relationship with you. That was my number one takeaway. And I did that, not that night, but like 2 days later.
I was happy to get that call from you.
Yeah,
like,
and it's been really sweet. Like lately,
so
we've just
amazing.
had a lot better, like we've had like just some great conversations lately since that. And then, yeah, even had some great conversations with my mom and my other sister around, kind of the stuff that came up and our experiences with that. So that's been wonderful. And yeah, so that was, and then it was like, okay, well, is that connected to why I'm sick?
Right.
And you were like, okay, well, let's, wait and see. And I think you gave me some advice of like, all right, pay attention to your body next time it comes up. And then I think you told me to do some other things that I wrote down that I then couldn't find. And then when the sickness started coming up again, I was like, just trying to listen to my body more and kind of look at like, okay, what's, is this something I'm afraid of? What deeper fears could be here? And also like not pushing myself, not trying to force myself to, get through it, and just more like, okay, like, listening to it and letting the process play out. So then 3 months later, I got sick again, and that lasted for a good 2 weeks. It's actually still going on, and it's been almost 3 weeks. So we'll see if it's finally kicked, or if I'm going to be craving a nap in about 3 hours, which is about when it kicks in. So then that's when we just reconnected of like, all right, well, what's the next step in the process of uncovering if my long COVID is due to something around my parents getting divorced when I was 15?
Yes. That's awesome. I'm just going to jump right in because so one of the things I want to talk about is that when you say you were starting to listen to your body. Now, you and I have had, extensive conversations about that. But if someone doesn't understand what that means, who's listening, what would you say? How would you coach them? What would you tell them? How do they listen to their body?
I would tell them to talk to you, because I still don't really understand it. The
Great,
best I understand is to kind of like maybe close your eyes and like ask a question, and then see what, if anything, starts happening in your body of like, does your stomach get tight? Is your thumb twitching? Or even like maybe even kind of hearing some kind of voice or knowing just like coming from what feels like beneath your brain.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So, like,
am I doing it right?
You're doing great. I mean, the other thing is like, no one can get into your body, right, and listen for you, and you can't get into anybody else's. I can kind of describe, so everybody does it differently, and everybody's body responds differently. But one of the interesting things, I think, in the situation when we were in the bar, away from dinner, getting eyes, was that, for example, your arm going numb. So it wasn't numb before, and then it becomes numb. And then you process some of the sadness, some of this anger, and all the emotions that come up. And then your body and your arm feel again. And I find this often when someone is ignoring something, they have a wall up to one part of what's happened in their life, that it's actually a numbness. And then it comes out in certain ways. So for you, it came out through your left arm. Other people can come out in different parts of their body, their face, around their tooth, their tongue, different. I've seen all kinds of things. I've even seen Bell's palsy happen for a few hours. It was bizarre. Like, it happened only for about 2 or 3 hours. And then she processed what she was dealing with, and it went away. I mean, we weren't sure if the Bell's palsy was going to go away. And I did have the help of an acupuncturist as well. But it was amazing to see that it just went boop, right back. Her smile was back to normal. And it was very interesting. And I think that there's just so much about the brain and the spirit and soul that we just don't understand. And I'm trying to bring some awareness of how to bring that all together. And so listening, you're doing great, Ryan, is what I want. Is my short of that is to say, yeah, you're doing great. And I wanted to continue, because my suggestion is, because this is coming up every 3 months, there's a cycle. There's a lot of cycles that are 3 months long, that are 12 weeks long. And so my coaching to you was to say, all right, look at other things in your life, in your past, that were 3 months long, And it could be like, sometimes a semester is about 3 months long. So one semester, the 12 weeks is a huge cycle in a lot of things. In astrology, it's in the Bible, it's a big deal. A lot of things happen in 3 months and 12 weeks. And so I think that if you can find, because the timing is now not random. The timing six times in a row that's not random, and that's definitely chronic now. And so what's happening in those 3 months? Some of your cells totally recreate themselves in 3 months. There's a lot of things. So and because I have touched the areas of your body that I know hold emotion, and that they were numb. Some of them were numb on your chest. And then they did start feeling. When I first worked on you the first time, when I recognized that your body wasn't ready, and your mind's like, wait, no, go. That's a very common response, where people will come in and they'll say, just go as hard as you can. And I'm like, it even scares me. I'm like, whoa, I don't have any hammers. And they're like, you don't? Actually, I do have a hammer, because sometimes there's some like calf cramps, your calf cramps, like there's sometimes you have to have like a really heavy, almost mallet to help that get out. But my point is that type of hardness against it is a very common response when the mind is really ready and frustrated and just can't figure it out. And the mind is like, just do this. And there's this kind of impatience and harshness and lack of willingness to take it layer at a time. And then if we can bring that back to let's instead of make it like this, to internalize those detective skills of our own body. So when I say listen, and you say, oh yeah, I was asking and seeing if my body responded. So I really want to hone in on our own detective skills of our own body. So my coaching again was to do some journaling on anything that you could remember that was 3 months long, and I also believe that this is the same timing as the divorce and things with your sister. So that's my take on it. And so now I'm curious about, how did it go? Because you did a lot of journaling, and what did you discover?
Yes, I journaled this morning for about 40 minutes, using some of the prompts you gave me, and took about 3 pages. So first I'll tell you about the process, which was like, like I'm journaling questions that I'm kind of asking my body. So I found this weird thing going between like my brain and then like checking in, does my body have an answer? And then what kind of ended up happening was it felt like I would just like give the pen over for a little bit to my body. Like that's what it felt like, where I was like asking a question, and then I'm like, okay, some answer kind of feels like it's coming out. I'm just going to let that happen. I don't know if I'm just making this up or if this is like actually my body doing a thing and like communicating with me. So it was this weird kind of thing of almost like, me and my body take, like, I guess my conscious brain and my body taking turns with the pencil talking to each other. That's what
Great
it
process.
felt like.
That's a nice process, Brian. So incredibly, I love how you just described it. I'll continue. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So that was wild. And even as I'm doing it and afterwards, just being like, okay, this is a thing, I guess. And
no,
then what?
I was going to say, that's very good, because there is, and we are taught, especially in the American culture, to separate those two. So we separate, we force things, and we separate feeling what our body's trying to say. So I'm just thrilled with your description. Plus, you're a copywriter. You're an incredible copywriter, by the way, if anybody needs a copywriter. But, okay, go ahead, Brian. Sorry. I keep interrupting you. I'm going to be really quiet now.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So that was that happened. And then also, when you first told me to look for these 12-week cycles, the first thing that came into my mind was summer vacation as a kid. And then as I was journaling, that just kept coming up too. And I was like, what are we talking about? What's that got to do with anything? And so basically the highlights that I got from this conversation, pen paling I was doing with my body, was like a fear of being too much me, right? Like it starts like kind of when you're a little kid, it's like, oh, that's too much. You're too loud, too much. You got to like tamper it down. You got to, mom needs a nap. Dad's busy. Like just chill. So it was like, that was kind of the start of it. And then I think it connected to my parents' divorce, because what I found myself writing was I can't express my anger towards my dad in the situation, because what if he leaves me too? And even now I'm like feeling a little choked up saying that. And it's also very surprising because like I'd never remember that being a conscious thought. Like at that time I wasn't afraid. Like I didn't consciously think that would happen. But then yeah, I found myself writing that and kind of feeling emotional around that. So I was like, oh, that might be part of this, of if I'm too much of myself, then I'm expressing my anger, and then my dad's going to leave me too. And then I was like asking how the 3 months kind of fit into this. And it was, because that's when you're a kid, that's the kind of time that you have for like freedom. Like you can be yourself for 3 months. You wake up, you do whatever you want. And, I'm rollerblading with my kid friend and jumping on the trampoline and all the great things. And then it's like 3 months. Okay. And now you got to shut it all down, be a good little student, all that kind of stuff. And it just, so it was just kind of like my body's just telling me like 3 months is what I can do being like that. That's what you can do for being yourself. And the other interesting thing about this of like the expressing yourself, the sickness.
Can I just want to say something. I'm noticing that your throat is you're clearing your throat. And I also just wanted to point out that are you breathing when you're talking about your dad?
Probably not.
Because that when you were sad about that, there's this change of behavior, change of your posture and change of the way your neck is, the change of your eyes, where they look. And those are the types of things that I point out. And I just wanted to, as you're doing that, before we get further into, I just wanted to just to point that out as you more listening skills of how your body is responding to this. Because it's the sadness. When we have sadness towards things, we are taught to ignore our sadness and to really hide it within a group of people. You totally stuff. And even if it's one person, and even if it's someone you don't know, like for me, I'm in that situation where if I'm sad, right? If I'm in a grocery store and I remember something that makes me sad, I can't express it. I can't cry. I can't whatever. And so I'm just saying, like, I just wanted to point that out because your posture changed, your head motion changed, your eyes changed, and your jaw changed. So I just want to point that out.
Okay. But that's super cool. And yeah, I can totally see that now as you say that, of like, oh yeah, there is that, like you just get caught up in it and that becomes a way of not feeling it fully.
Exactly. And I keep stopping you, Brian. I do that, but I just wanted to point that out because if we go further in, then sometimes you don't recognize what happened just then. So, and I just wanted other people who are watching this too, if you roll back 30 seconds, you can see how his posture went like this. And then he rolled his head and his eyes to the gaze. I call it the gaze. You avert your gaze to a different direction. And that can affect your neck, your eyes, your jaw, the front of your chest, your confidence, the way you breathe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, I'll put my hand up, but I'm going to put myself on mute so I don't jump in as much.
That's why this stuff you do is so cool. You get to see all these cues that like most people aren't paying that much attention to. And it's like, oh no, this is important. So where was I? Oh, yes. So the other part that, became clear to me was the sickness happened in August 2020. And that's right about the time that I signed up for this life coaching program, this Rhonda Britton's Fearless Living certification program, which I took because I was her copywriter. And I was just like, oh, she's awesome. Her stuff's awesome. Everyone who takes her course is raving about it. I want to try this, just like really just for my own growth and my own, like, I just want the skills to help people through the big problems in their life. Because all I can do right now is offer advice that nobody takes and probably isn't that very good of advice anyway. So so this happened right around then. And like, it was always in the back of my mind for a long time that of me being either a therapist or a coach of some kind. And I was like, didn't do it for various reasons. And so the fact that I was now kind of stepping into this thing that's been like, knocking at the back of my mind for a good 15 years or so, and is very much feels like this true expression of who I am and what I'm here to do, and in this role that is very much about just like bringing myself fully to my clients and out onto the world, and like admitting to the world I'm a mindset coach. That was a whole thing to go to. So yeah, there was a lot of like, this is me, this is who I am and what I'm kind of here to do. And as I was journaling, that felt like connected to the, being a kid and can't be too much of yourself. You can do it for 3 months and then you gotta, go back to school. So yeah, that's the part that makes all this make sense of like, oh yeah, this, you could be onto something here. This could be it. It could just be tied to these pieces. And then I was also, did more journaling to my body of like, what do you need? I need to feel safe. I want to feel free. What would help you feel safe? Like, you are safe, right? Like, I got you, that kind of stuff. And it actually ended with a pretty beautiful end of saying I love you to my body. My body said it back, and it was just like I was, and I was like, did I do it? Did I fix it? So we'll see.
I love that, and the journal prompts about safety are so important, because that is, I think, the key to the healing the conversation between the body and the mind, because the body at some point didn't feel like you were respecting it in some manner. And the mind we have such a way of just plowing through. And so the safety issues. Yeah. So what came up around safety else? What do you remember anything else that came up around safety, or lack thereof, or trust? Those are big words.
It's not safe to express myself for too long, or to be too much of myself. I think there's also a little bit of, my body's saying like, it's too much. If I am, it's too much for me. And I was kind of like, is it? Like, you can only handle so much like love and happiness and joy. Are you sure? And it was like, okay, I could do more. But that was all I can remember of it coming up, really around like self-expression and really being more fully myself.
So the statement of you're too much of yourself, what will happen if you are too much of yourself?
Bothering people, being rejected, not being wanted, being alone.
Okay. And what part of your expression brings that up?
What part of my expression?
What type of communication or body language, or how are you in the world? Too loud? Do you laugh too loud? Do you move too fast? Those types of things. What type of expression? So if each of one of those was an expression, if you're like, like, oh, that's really funny, kind of gregarious, I guess that would be considered. Or if you're, what type of expression is too much? Like it can't be everything. So your mind probably is seeing one or two that just go, oh, I better not do that. Are there any of those that come up?
Yeah, being too loud and following the things that I'm interested in.
Wow. Okay. What are you what are you interested in that's going to be that will reject your loved ones?
In reality, nothing, but what might kind of be stuck there is just some of the like personal growth aspect or spirituality, or even coming to that's been like a bit of a thing recently, of coming to terms with my nerdy hobbies and sharing that with people, which has actually gone great. So that stuff used to be there, so it's
and when were you rejected at one point?
Oh yeah, for a long time.
Okay. For those hobbies, and for those, you said being too loud, and for your nerdy hobbies. Okay.
Yeah. Or just like saying what I'm thinking, or just like kind of sharing whatever's going on with me. It just feels like more of a just expressing myself is just like,
keep it down, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay. So like you said, also like religious beliefs. So if you came up with some ideas and you were just, you were exploring some ideas like, wow, this is interesting. What if God did this? Or what if and those were not allowed. Is that correct? Is that kind of am I saying that right?
Like when, like as a kid growing up, or now?
Yeah, definitely as a kid. I mean, now I know that you are much better at self-expression. You're so good at it. And I think that this is part of your journey, is that you've learned to express yourself, and you've learned to hear others and express what they're trying to say. And I think this is what you were going through. Part of what you were going through in your journey is to be able to do that for people. But I think also when we're rejected like that, there's a way that we start to unravel that thought process to make it not get you rejected. But in the process, it also sticks itself in the body. So for example, you like a nerdy hobby, and so the first reaction, so you don't want to be rejected, is like this, you immediately stop everything.
Yeah.
And the jaw gets tight, all these responses to stress. But the thought process of that nerdy hobby, like my son loves Legos. He's an 18-year-old who loves Legos. And so that's kind of a nerdy hobby, but it's a very popular hobby. And so you hide it, you avert that thought process, you avert the actual reality or the truth behind it. And so there's a lot of things when we hold truth, our jaw gets really tight. Under here can hold more lymph. The teeth can be sore. All this muscle and tissue can be more tender and not heal as quickly from acne or from headaches, from COVID, from coughing. It sticks right here because it can't drain as quickly. There's a lot of things about holding back, and it's in everything, Brian. So like for you, maybe a nerdy hobby. For other people, it's, they couldn't say something to their parent, or they couldn't say something to a boss, or they couldn't say something to a teacher, or to the police, or to, you name it. There's so many that we aren't allowed to express. And so I'm just trying to help you look at what words, actions, responses to those times in your life that could have possibly been stuck in your body. So it would be, so how you can tell. And so I forgot to send these to you last night. I forgot, sorry. That the things that we look for is, does your body stop breathing? And that is so hard to recognize until you're better at recognizing it, because we're so good at not breathing. That's definitely one of the first responses is we want to stay really quiet. We don't want to seem at all stressed, right? Like if you go, that though that gets you a lot of breath, that also looks weak. And so people don't want to gasp, or they don't want to, you definitely don't want to sweat in public, so we wear all this deodorant, and we have ways that we don't show that type of stress, that type of panic. You can, but there's other things that we do. So like you can grip your teeth, your jaw, and you can see it a little bit, but a lot of us have learned to do that with no one being able to tell. So stopping your breathing, stopping your, or grinding your teeth, or just grabbing your jaw. Also, like we can make our face really tight. There's different ways. There's ways that people will put their fingers together. People will curl their toes. That's another huge one. They'll push their knee in or out. They'll push their hip in or out, one side to the other. A lot of the people can hold their stomach really tight. So besides holding our stomach tight, and also if you're standing, there's a way to tell if you're responding to things by if you put your feet. So if you put your weight on the toes or on your heels, or if you switch your feet, you switch your stance. And athletes will know that, like in jiu-jitsu and in other sports, if you put your right hand forward, or your right foot forward, or your left foot forward, you are in a position to fight. And there's also, when you're in a defensive mode and you put your heel back, then it's almost like you're going like this. And it's really interesting, is through the years of massaging people, I was like, let me check that theory. And I would check these theories on people, and it was really fun. But it was like, okay, if they're on their heels, and I would think through, and I would put myself in that position, and like, what muscles are involved in that type of defense mechanism? And sure enough, like the whole coming up from the heels all the way up through the knees, through the hips, through the diaphragm, all the way up through the throat and into the neck and into the jaw and into the back of the head, you can find these lines. And so when we can be more aware of how we're responding, so you probably had a way of averting anytime you were wanting to talk to your dad, anytime you were wanting to talk to your mom about your dad, and you're doing this great thing, this very honorable thing of staying quiet and keeping, staying like on his side, but still being angry and not being able to process that as a kid, as a teenager. We don't have the tools to do that. And so there was this, I bet you could find a way that your body was everting in a physical form your emotional state. So the emotional state is like, oh, I am really angry with you, but I don't want to lose you. I don't want you to leave me. And I don't want to hurt you right now because you're hurting a lot in the divorce. And there's all these crazy emotions. And so your body also, like becoming a young man and all your testosterone showing up and all these other hormones, like your body was probably freaking out. And I would wonder, my question to you is, if you can try to put yourself in one of those days and try to remember what you did to relax, and also what your body could have been doing. Now, this is hard to remember. Sometimes, Brian, it's funny. It seems like it's hard to remember. And then as soon as you're like, oh my gosh, I used to do this weird, and like people will say these, like, I used to do this thing and I would spin my hair and I would twist, and I realized that I hurt on my left hip. And it's like, huh. And it comes out where you're going to allow your body to tell you and remember those motions with which you handled this emotional tension. And so what I'm suggesting is that possibly some of that is stuck in a circular motion that continues. When it starts to relax and you get out of you're almost at the 3-month mark. Ooh, and we got, oh, we can't. So there's something in that time when you're getting sick where you could look at why why does your immune system drop? Why does it drop? Why is it taking on this this form of healing? Where we were talking about this yesterday, is there's many times where the body, that I have noticed in the thousands and tens of thousands of people I've worked with, that there's a time where feeling sick is way safer than actually working on and figuring out and opening up the Pandora's box of why you might be getting sick. So people finally get frustrated, but sometimes people don't even recognize that every 3 months they're getting sick, or every 6 months, or my son gets sick every last week of school. Even this year, he missed some things for his senior year, and it started when he was in pre-K, and he missed their little going fishing trip, and he still remembers that. And it's the same cold. He gets this earache, headache, and like 101 fever every May. It's like May 15th every time. And it's an interesting way that our body responds to what type of tension. He's responding to, I'm not going to see my friends anymore. I'm very sad about that, but I'm not going to cry. So he would hold it all in and give himself this major headache. And then he would have these earaches and really thick ear wax, which was very odd. It's a very specific symptom in homeopathy. But how you were dealing with your dad, how were you dealing with your sisters and your mom in a way that still needs to be looked at today? And yeah, those are the questions, like those are the ones like you were journaling about. How can I feel safe? What is my body trying to tell me? How can I help my body trust me? How can I help my body communicate what it needs to say in a way that I'm willing to hear it? And so that's why when I say the words listen and hear, it's not like your body is physically speaking to you, or there's words that are going to come. Like you were saying, sometimes you can ask the words and then you can feel what your body responds with. Does it respond with a heart rate that gets higher? You respond with getting really tired. You respond with getting hungry. There's different ways that we respond that can give you hints of what your body needs. And that's how it's talking. So that communication of body language through body to mind is something that I've just seen missing in so many people, even that I work with a lot of monastics. I work with people who meditate for 12 to 18 hours daily for years, decades, and they still have a block between what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, and how can I put those together so that I can be this most powerful leader, this most powerful mom, teacher, business person, etc. I love your smile too, Brian. You're amazing. But I was talking too much. So tell me more about, is that where you ended your journaling?
Yes.
Okay. And we really didn't have much time to prepare for this, but I'm just really thankful that you were willing to jump on and show part of the process. So the process first is to be aware that there's something that is not able to be resolved. And though you try many, many things, it's still not resolved. And that's when someone like me can really help. But there's a lot of me's out there. And they don't all do what I do, but they do something similar where they try to help you find the missing pieces, the missing puzzle piece, the missing hint, the missing clue that can help you put the things together so that you can finally resolve that. Just let it calm down and not be causing you to not work every 3 months. That's a lot. That's a lot for the body to go through. What else have you learned about that?
About what exactly?
I guess I know you've learned so much and you've been asking, and that's another reason is when you are asking so many people and getting incredible help. You're surrounded by some incredible healers right now. And because you are so open and willing and aware of the lack of, well, not just the lack's a bad word. So like I would say that the fact that it's not resolving, that it continues in this pattern, that another thing that comes up for me for you is that you have more to learn around this. And I told this to you yesterday, is where often I see this when people are about to become the helper of others in this area, then you go through it yourself and you're able to really understand it because you've gone through it in your own body. Because like you and I have talked about before, this is quite hard to explain. And it's not easy to explain in a few words. Like you can explain it, in 100 words. But when people say, hey, tell me what you do in 5 words or 8 words or less, like this is, it's deep and it's very personal. And, not everybody's been through divorce. Not everybody has a sister, not everybody does improv, like everybody has their own puzzle pieces to put together, and some are much more serious than others. And I just think there's so much we don't know about the body and the brain and what's around us spiritually. And I'm just so fascinated by it. I feel like I'm a kindergartner every day and trying to give a little bit of information of what I've learned, but there's so much more out there. And I'm so excited to learn more and more. And I listen to a lot of people on YouTube or read things and all the time to learn more. I would love to do a CT scan on people that I'm working on, and do a CT before and do a CT after, and to see if we can change some behaviors in their brain. That'd be really cool. And yeah. I haven't had the time to pursue that, but I am about to be an empty nester, and so that's definitely on the top, one of the highlights of my list. So
yeah, well, it was cool data to get.
Yeah. So what's your next steps now?
Well, one was to ask you, because a couple minutes ago, you mentioned like my next steps being like to understand why my body is shutting down. But I'm like, but didn't I just do that? And didn't I figure out it's okay, Brian, too much Brian, got to shut it down. Only allowed 3 months at a time of expression, and then it's, shut it down. So don't I kind of know the why now? And I feel like the next step is the thing you said around, okay, let's maybe see how my body might have been closed off or like avoiding pain around that time. I'm not quite sure the purpose of that, but I'll do whatever you tell me. And then also to continue kind of letting my body know it's safe and keeping a kind of dialogue going to see if anything else comes up. Like maybe this was just one layer of several, or maybe I need to like continue addressing the same thing, or maybe there's more to it that, now that I've uncovered this layer might get revealed.
So I absolutely agree that there's more layers, and we have to be, as humans, prepared to continue to learn how not to stuff emotion, how to recognize our own patterns of what we're used to when we're scared, what we're used to when you're sad, when you're worried about being abandoned. All humans have the same layers, right? The fear, anger, not wanting to be abandoned, and others. And so there will be patterns you will have emotionally, mentally, spiritually to respond to that. And so my piece of it is to say, recognize what your body is doing within those moments when you're scared. And this is what I'm saying, when your body is more safe, it feels safer being sick than it does figuring this out. There's going to be a time where that starts to shift. and it's going to feel sick. It's going to feel, like, hey, I don't want to be sick, and I can work these things out and not be sick. So that does take time. And so, being, like you said, so I'm cured, right? I figured it out, like that. I would challenge that theory, and I think that you probably have to go through it a little bit more, and it's going to be less sickness until you recognize that I don't need sickness. I don't need to be sick. I have a strong immune system, and it's okay for me to figure out and to be as strong and an amazing Brian as I can. And when that happens, then this conversation is going to be like a distant memory. And like, I used to get sick is kind of the response for the rest of your life. Like, and then you go, you know what? I used to get sick and I can help you. And then you turn it into a way of helping others. But that's Brian, in my opinion, how it's going to, how it's going to play out, where there's more layers. And here's another thing is like, we get scared, right? So again, so your body being more comfortable being sick than being powerful, just like me, like we were talking about how I'm going through that. Like I keep coming up with different niches or, different people I'm supposed to help or whatever I come up with, because I also am avoiding that responsibility really, and that success and that failure. So there's ways that we respond to that. So in your lifetime, when you get sick, after you get this resolved and you're like, okay, I feel like I have this under control. Then years later, like if you get sick in the same way, you don't have to, but you could consider the possibility of looking at, what am I afraid of? Why? Because my body's been responding to fear in a way that makes me feel under the weather. And so you want to stop that pattern and instead give ourselves other patterns. For me, like it feels like I've swallowed a hair, like, and it's really hard for me. So I have my own patterns of dealing with my fears, and they're very detrimental to like public speaking, which I'm about to do, right? So like, it could be very detrimental to start coughing or to start, like the self-sabotage, that if you can recognize, that's the listening part, the awareness of how you respond to your fears is what solves these problems. And I don't want to call them problems. I want to call them communications. This is what solves. Your body is asking for a result, to resolve them. And we ignore it and we just keep getting sick. I ignore it and I just keep coughing, or I keep, doing whatever I'm doing. Yeah. And I think that if I use it as a barometer. So for example, when a pro athlete comes in and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, one of my favorites is quarterback, he's unable to roll to the left. And until he looks at the fear of why his left foot won't take off. So there's this fear of success, fear of failure. I might look bad. My parents might be mad at me. I might be off the team. Whatever the issues are for him, until that gets resolved, that foot is going to drag when he rolls to the left. Same thing for us. It's business related. And so interesting. Business related is the word that I get stuck on. So I just think it's a fascinating subject and could talk about it, obviously, all day.
What is the value when you mentioned like, okay, now think back to when you were 15 and like how your body would kind of like respond to these emotions and kind of like protect myself from the pain, and like what my body would be doing in those instances. What does me exploring that do?
So that exploring, what happens in the exploration of old body patterns is that sometimes an aha moment will show up where your knee twists and you're like, whoa, I used to do that when I was 15. And then you'll recognize, that's what I mean. Like, so that's something that is very hard to recognize in yourself, is how you twist when you're angry, how you twist when you're feeling unsupported, when you're feeling unsafe in a relationship, when you're feeling like you're going to lose your dad. There's a way that your entire body will respond. And what happens is that fascia, or that tissue around those joints, it sometimes has not given up that tension. Sometimes like those, it's such a fascinating type of tissue. The fascia can get really, really hard, and it can, and then it just wreaks havoc. So for you with this COVID thing, I would look at the tissues around the top torso, and how that, affects your breathing, how that affects your twisting. Here's another one for you. Any type of fighter, you're doing jujitsu and other types of, any type of fighting, there's a way that you can see what your range of motion is with your chest, because our rib cage twists when we're in distress. So, it's such a cool part of our body, but it can twist. And then I find bodies will come in and it's twisted, and that's how they live their life, and they're like, what? I don't understand why my shoulder blade is on fire all the time. And when we can push that back, then they don't have the shoulder pain. The problem is, if they haven't resolved the issue that created that, and it's a chronic problem, if you just resolve the issue and that's all it was, like this muscle was sore, and then they never need to see me again, or that won't come back. If it's chronic, then it just goes back in that area. So that's what's happening with your body. Somehow your body is having this reaction, and it's either probably in your lungs, in your, I don't know, that I would have to do a little bit more body work on you. We could look at your rib cage and to see, because if your rib cage is twisted, your lungs work differently, your heart works differently, and it's sometimes more stressed, or sometimes pulling on different capillaries or blood vessels, that when it's relaxed, it has much more energy. So though that seems very, it's hard to do that on yourself, and it seems very complicated. Actually, it only takes a little bit. And then what I'm trying to do is, when I hold people's body where it should be, and then ask them the questions I've been asking you, and their body will go, it'll try to move back. And we talk about these questions when I'm holding it in place, and it will, oftentimes, probably 80%, it will say, they'll recognize why it's doing that. And I also, there's times where it's just not time yet. It's just too deep, or it's too painful, or it's too scary. And forcing it is the opposite of what should happen. So that's just another side note. You can't force this. You do have to allow it to have its own dance. That makes sense? See, another long answer.
It does. And you both brought up and answered questions as you were talking, because I was going to ask, like, I did yoga for about a 2-year period very regularly, and I really enjoyed yin yoga. And my initial question was like, how come I never had one of those, like, I don't know, people go do yoga and they stretch, and then like they cry because they're like, oh, I opened up a thing and I had an emotional release. And I'm like, I never felt an emotional release. It was, hey, I can touch my toes now. That's really cool. But like, this feels good. But that stuff never happened. And I think you just answered that question with like, because it's not time, because, part of me is not ready. And the other thing, I was wondering if I can integrate some like yin and stretching into what we've been talking about. Like, if you're talking about like upper body things, like, I don't know, could I be doing my upper body yin stretches and then like asking my body what's up or anything like that? Like, is there a way to integrate this?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about body awareness, and any type of stretching, any type of specific corrective exercises are awesome. Any exercises are really good. So we can do very specific. You and I we can get on here and I can give you some real specific things, but there's really what feels good. You can find a gazillion things on YouTube on how to expand your rib cage or your chest, or to stretch this whole area. But I can come up with very specific ones for people. And not only, there's usually a line, not just in the area that we concentrate on, but it will go all the way down to your feet, and it will come all the way till sometimes into the head fascia and muscles, but definitely to the end of the top of the neck and the occiput, like right where the skull meets the head, the skull meets the neck. So, but yes, the short answer, of course, stretching and breathing are always good for everything in our life. I wish I did more of it. There's some great breathing weekends that I'm looking at going into and learning more. We hold so much, so breathing is really helpful.
Yeah.
There's another long answer.
Cool. Yeah. And I like that point you made earlier of like kind of noticing, like, I think I do notice myself like, oh, I haven't breathed in a while, but I won't really go into like, and why, and what just happened moments before that. That's sort of like, what's going on exactly. And that could be a valuable thing to explore.
I mean, body awareness takes energy. It takes focus and it takes discipline, and we can't be aware of our body all the time. And, we're all going to slouch, and we're all going to have our little patterns of, I call it like we're pouting at ourselves. And we all do that. So, being self-aware all the time, it's impossible, but to try, that's what we just need to try. Like being kind to ourselves so that we can be kind to others. That's definitely what I tell especially my younger students and younger clients, is that if you can learn to be aware of your own inner anger, then you will be more aware of your outer anger. And also, if you're more aware of how you can be kind to yourself, you're going to be aware of how your kindness to others has nothing to do with them being angry with you, but it can sometimes brighten their day with just a smile. And it's such amazing energy connection that it's extremely important. And being kind to ourselves. I know I'm a perfectionist, and I'm quite angry with myself often. And what do we gain? It's a lot of negativity, and it helps us continue the conversation of, that I shouldn't be successful, that I'm going to fail, that don't have the right to teach, and I don't have, all those, the don'ts, that I'm not, and we want to be the other way. Let's be positive and bright light and playful and optimistic and all those great words. So, but I slouch all the time, and I don't do my eye exercises, and I don't do my breathing, and I don't meditate, and I eat sugar. So, but it's a fascinating subject, huh, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's such a good point of like, I was even just thinking of like, well, if I'm talking to my body like 3 minutes a day, that's 3 minutes more than I was doing before. Like that's something. And then, that can get more of a conversation going regularly. And yeah, like, when you learn the body awareness stuff, then it becomes like, oh, well, now there's all these body awareness practices I need to do. And then you learn literally any other modality. You're like, well, now I need to do, and suddenly your day becomes full of just like 10,000 things of like brain and body and wellness exercises that you need to do. And it's like, well, this is impossible. So yeah, having these like reasonable standards of like, I'm not going to do breathing all the time, but I'm going to go to this breathing workshop next weekend, and that's going to give me a nice little reset. And then I'll fall off the wagon, and then I'll go again in 6 months or whatever it is. And
exactly.
that's
and also,
fine.
like, the whole point is, like, if you like, for you, you're getting, you're sick, so you're going to notice once in a while. And for someone who's getting headaches, for example, and they recognize that they get headaches on Thursdays, that first of all is to recognize, oh, a pattern of Thursday. And then they recognize, oh, I just talked to Joe. Every Thursday I have a conversation with Joe because he comes by the office. Oh, I grind my teeth and I curl my toes in, and I want to punch him in the face, but I hold myself back. And then they're like, oh, maybe there's a connection. That's the whole point, when we can back up and see how our body's responding to the world in a way that's totally negative to ourselves, and that we can respond better. So the next time Joe comes in, you just like put this, invisible shield up and you say, I'm going to breathe through this. I am not going to yell at him in my head, because I can't say anything or else I'm going to get fired or whatever, be looked at weird. So instead of yelling at him in my head, I'm going to, zen and pray and have a deep breath and recognize. That's what I mean. Once people start doing that on a, like you said, maybe even once a week, like, okay, when Joe comes to your office, let's be a little kinder or a little bit more aware of how we're responding. But then it gets more and more, you're better at it. See, you're better at it. Some people, they're starting from ground zero, and this conversation is very uncomfortable and means nothing to them. I have people tell me, like, this is really stupid. This doesn't make any sense. And then I ask them, like, simple questions about their health, and I'm fine. But they're like, wow, okay, I see that you are so calm and well-rounded. And so, but it just takes practice, just like everything else. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Meditation and prayer and copywriting, for example, it takes practice. Copywriting, you have to listen. So just like you've learned to listen to others and then say it back. This is just internal. And listen.
Ooh, yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, that's good, huh? Thank you, Brian. Can I interview you again sometime?
Sure, I'm around.
All right. I love that. I appreciate you being here and being so candid and open. And I have your permission, right? Is it okay to put this out and have people hear it and comment? And can they get a hold of you and ask you questions about this and your business? Sure. Brian at McCarthyMindsetCoaching.com. If you have questions about Ruth work with me or whatever. Yeah. Like I said, I'm around. Awesome. Great, Brian. I appreciate you. And everybody, thank you for being here for Your Body Advocate podcast. And I will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Your Body Advocate with Ruth Cummings. We're so glad you've joined us today and truly believe you can live a pain-free, passion-filled life. To connect with Ruth, work with Ruth, or to grab your free ebook, go to ruthcummings.com. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. Until next time, friends, be open, include the unincluded, think outside the box, and spread love and kindness one smile at a time.